Thank you all for coming. What do you think of when you think of service? Maybe the waitress at the restaurant that you frequent, or your plumber or electrician who comes to your house to fix your water heater or your air conditioning. You may also think of military service. People often thank those in the military for their service. Being of service to others is one of the main concepts of volunteerism. I get to see the impact of volunteers on a daily basis being the volunteer coordinator at Sienna Francis House. I'd like to share with you some of the concepts of volunteerism. Volunteerism is rooted deep in our country's culture. It started with the colonization, people coming from Europe, moving to America. They wanted to separate church and state. If church was voluntary, then there was no reason for the state to be involved and make it mandatory. Volunteerism grew even bigger in the U.S. through wartime. They recruited volunteers to volunteer to fight in wars. They also recruited volunteers for recovery efforts, such as asking women to work during war times, and then in recovery efforts like collecting food and helping those who came home. The term volunteerism is actually rooted in a military term that means to protect and serve. The church and the military are no longer the biggest forces behind volunteerism. Volunteerism also plays a big role in our local education. In Omaha, Creighton University uses volunteerism or an immersion experience as part of their graduation criteria. Students are required to stay in a homeless shelter for 3 days, to live there, to serve there, and to work there in order to graduate. Another example of volunteerism in a college setting is the AmeriCorps program. Students can volunteer through AmeriCorps to help fund their education and earn scholarships towards furthering their education. They also get training in things that will help them with their volunteer efforts, and it usually supports the education that they're learning in school. Even high school students utilize volunteerism, usually as part of a class requirement in order to graduate also. Volunteerism is a great way for teachers to teach about social policy. They get to meet the people that are affected most by the laws, welfare laws most specifically, so they get to see the impact of those things. Students also find meaning and purpose in volunteering, and they can carry that into their careers. In moving to the corporate environment, volunteerism is a big part of corporate culture. Volunteerism in the corporate environment allows employees to interact in their community. Companies in Omaha like Wells Fargo offer unlimited paid volunteer hours to their employees. So employees are allowed to volunteer in any aspect that they'd like. It doesn't have to do with their skill set or banking. They can volunteer in a soup kitchen, mentor at the Boys and Girls Club, or other local agencies. I know that at the homeless shelter I work at, Wells Fargo volunteers not only in our Run Walk as a corporate sponsor and participants in the Run Walk, but they also come to serve dinner, help with the computer lab, and mentor children. The Washington Post reports that volunteerism is the new way for corporations to give back without giving grants or funding. In the past, corporations would have put out funds to helping agencies to help them support certain programs. The agencies would write an application, turn it in, and then get money to fund maybe a position or a program. But the grants were very specific, and the money could only be spent on that single purpose. So sometimes they weren't as meaningful as just giving the money to them, and it's definitely not as meaningful as having the employees interact with the agencies directly. Other reports show that employees who volunteer are more fulfilled in their jobs. And that was recently reported by the Sydney Morning Herald. So it gives employees a well-rounded work culture and some balance in their work life. In looking at the long-standing history of volunteerism, started with colonization, moved through wartime efforts, and has transformed into a piece of education in our corporate environment currently. Volunteerism as a culture is on the rise. In an article published by the Examiner from the nonprofit Times, it says that volunteerism is going up, and 1 in 4 people are volunteers. Is anyone here a volunteer?
We do.
Would you like to share about your experience?
We are part of the JCs, and we've done youth emergency services where we cook for the homeless teenagers, so they have at least one solid warm meal. And then we also do the litter control, the Adopt a Highway. And we go out there twice a year and we clean up the highways and clean all the trash off.
Do you find meaning in your volunteerism?
Oh, yes.
Great. So now that you learned a little bit about where volunteerism came from, where it's going, and some of the concepts of volunteerism, I hope that you yourself will consider volunteering and that you understand how well-rounded it can help you to be. And thank you so much.